For all the calls to release the Epstein docs, a whole new tranche just came out today, and it's not the ones people were expecting. Bloomberg got 18,000 leaked emails. These have never been public before, from Epstein's personal email account. He was using Yahoo. And it sheds new light on his predatory tactics. It also continues to reinforce what the DOJ, under Ms. Comey, the now fired prosecutor, showed in her prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell, that she was a big part of this criminal enterprise, not, as she said in her interview, some sort of hanger-on as people did consensual things.
Leaked documents allege that Donald Trump issued presidential actions in the early morning hours affecting individuals tied to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal network. If proven true, this scandal could redefine what we know about Trump's relationship to Epstein's empire and destroy political careers. Let me take you inside what we now know, because the details read less like legitimate governance and more like the plot of a political thriller written by someone with a dark imagination. According to the leaked documents that have sent shockwaves through both parties, President Trump reportedly signed a series of controversial pardons in the pitch-black hours of a mid-November morning. We are talking about approximately 3 a.m., that strange liminal hour when the rest of the country is tucked into bed.
Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released new Epstein files, and they include emails between Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. Some of those emails mention Donald Trump by name. In one of the emails, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein wrote to a journalist in 2019, "Of course Trump knew about the girls." And in 2011, to his longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein wrote about President Trump, "Virginia spent hours at my house with him," adding, "He has never once been mentioned, police, etc."
When news cycles are dormant, when oversight mechanisms are effectively asleep, that is when the most powerful man in the world allegedly chose to dispense presidential mercy to individuals connected to Jeffrey Epstein's sprawling criminal network. Think about the sheer strangeness of that image for a moment. The resolute desk, a single lamp casting shadows across historic woodwork, and the President of the United States quietly signing away criminal liability for people tied to a man who victimized countless young women and girls. If that doesn't send a chill down your spine, nothing will. The timing alone is enough to make any reasonable person's skepticism alarm blare at full volume. Presidents do not normally conduct their most consequential constitutional business while the rest of the Capitol sleeps. There are protocols, there are procedures, there is a chain of command for all of the above.
This morning, newly released audio from Jeffrey Epstein's confidant, Ghislaine Maxwell.
I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way.
Maxwell describing her interactions with President Trump decades ago.
The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
Adding she does not believe former President Clinton did anything inappropriate either while interacting with Jeffrey Epstein, who would later become a convicted sex offender.
President Clinton was my friend, not Epstein's friend.
The Attorney's Office at the Department of Justice exists precisely to ensure that clemency decisions are made based on merit, not on personal connections or political convenience. That entire apparatus, designed over decades to inject fairness and transparency into the pardon process, was allegedly bypassed completely. No review, no recommendation, no public announcement. Just the scratch of a pen at 3 in the morning, witnessed only by whatever staff members were unlucky enough to be summoned to the White House in the middle of the night. The secrecy itself functions as an admission. When you do something in the dark, it is because you do not want to be seen. When you bypass every normal safeguard, it is because you know those safeguards would stop you. And when the recipients of your secret action are connected to Jeffrey Epstein, the question that screams for an answer is simple.
In 2007, Maxwell wrote reporters may have interviewed Trump about Epstein's case. You have to assume they went to Donald Trump. She notes, that's neither here nor there on Donald Trump's role. Many of Epstein's emails also discuss the predatory manipulation of those young women and sometimes girls. From a legal perspective, includes minors, according to, of course, the case. He and Maxwell discussed how to recruit and groom those young women and then discredit anyone who became an accuser. NBC has not obtained these emails or independently verified the Bloomberg report, we should note, and the revelations come as Epstein survivors have been speaking out.
Accountability is what makes a society civilized.
Trying to hide The political explosion that has followed this leak has been nothing short of seismic. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, and I want to emphasize both sides, have abandoned their usual partisan battle stations and united in a single demand for answers. Democrats predictably are calling for immediate investigations, but the real story here is the Republican response. These are not the usual suspects. These are not the perennial Trump antagonists who have made careers out of opposing him. These are members of his own party, people who have voted with him, defended him, stood by him through 2 impeachments and countless controversies. And now they are saying out loud and on the record that secret 3AM pardons for Epstein associates cross a line that even they cannot defend.
Give us a sense of the type of emails that mentioned former Ambassador Mandelson.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Jake. So these emails, there's about 100 of them between Mandelson and Epstein, and it covers a 5-year span between 2005 and 2010. Importantly, however, there are maybe about 80 or so that span the 2 years in which Jeffrey Epstein was charged with sex crimes in Florida, and following through 2008 when he was trying to fight back against the federal investigation.
Allies start demanding hearings under oath. You know you have a problem that cannot be spun, cannot be dismissed, and cannot be made to disappear with a few angry tweets. The media has naturally gone into overdrive, and for good reason. Every major news outlet is racing to verify the leaked documents, to identify the pardon recipients, to trace their connections to Epstein's network, and to understand what possible justification could exist for such extraordinary secrecy.
Mandelson told
And within those emails,
keep going.
yeah. Within those emails, you see, you read Mandelson, supporting Epstein to the point where he brings up using the art of war, Sun Tzu's art of war, as a tactic to way to fight back against these allegations. There's another email just a day before Epstein reported to prison in 2008. In which he said that, this is something that just couldn't happen in Britain. It was essentially a grave injustice, what was happening to Epstein.
The White House has attempted to downplay the situation, suggesting that the documents might not be authentic, offering the kind of non-denial denial that usually precedes a much larger admission. But here is the thing they cannot escape. They have not actually denied that the pardons happened. They have not provided any alternative explanation for what the president was doing at 3 in the morning. They have not offered to release the names of the recipients or the justifications for the pardons. Instead, they are stonewalling, hoping that the fury of the news cycle will move on to something else. It will not. This story has teeth, and those teeth are sinking deep into the soft underbelly of the Trump presidency. Let me tell you why this particular scandal is different from everything that came before. We have seen Trump survive accusations that would have ended any other political career. We have seen him weather storms that would have capsized lesser vessels. But the Epstein connection is uniquely, almost chemically, toxic. Jeffrey Epstein was not a controversial political figure. He was not a policy disagreement dressed up as a scandal. He was a convicted sex offender who ran a global trafficking operation that preyed on vulnerable young women and girls. His name is synonymous with the darkest corners of wealth and power, and now the President of the United States is accused of using his constitutional authority to secretly protect people connected to that monster. There is no spin that makes that look good. There is no talking point that makes that palatable. There is no base so loyal that it will swallow that without choking. The leaked documents reportedly show that Trump signed multiple pardons on that November night, and that some of the recipients have direct ties to Epstein's inner circle. We are not talking about tangential connections or distant associations. We are talking about people who moved in the same orbit, who attended the same events, who were part of the same network that enabled Epstein's crimes for years. And these people, according to the leak, are now free from federal criminal liability thanks to a 3AM signature from a president who has spent months resisting the public release of Epstein-related documents. Think about that pattern for a moment. On one hand, the administration has been stonewalling congressional inquiries and public demands for the full Epstein files. FBI Director Kash Patel has made claims about court orders that judges themselves have contradicted. Attorney General Pam Bondi has faced pointed questions about why the Justice Department is not being more transparent. On the other hand, while that public stonewalling was happening, the president was privately issuing pardons to Epstein associates in the dead of night. That is not a coincidence. That is a coordinated effort to protect people from accountability. And the only logical question that follows is, who else is being protected? Let me take you deeper into the actual mechanics of what allegedly happened, because the procedural details matter enormously. The normal pardon process in the United States is designed specifically to prevent the kind of abuse that these leaked documents suggest. When a typical pardon request comes into the White House, it first goes through the Office of the Pardon Attorney at the Department of Justice. That office, staffed by career professionals who serve across administrations, conducts a thorough investigation. They look at the applicant's criminal history. They examine the circumstances of the conviction. They consider evidence of rehabilitation. They solicit input from prosecutors and victims. They produce a written recommendation that goes up the chain of command. Only after all of that painstaking work does a president typically make a final decision. And even then, the White House usually issues a public announcement explaining the rationale. That entire apparatus exists for a reason: to ensure that pardons are granted fairly, transparently, and based on legitimate criteria rather than personal relationships or corrupt motivations. Now compare that painstaking process to what the leaked documents allegedly describe: no Office of the Pardon Attorney review, no career professionals evaluating the merits, no written recommendations, no public announcement, no explanation, just the President of the United States alone in the White House at 3 a.m. signing documents that erase criminal liability for people connected to Jeffrey Epstein. The contrast could not be more stark. And the obvious question that screams from every page of these leaked documents is simple. What was so urgent about 3 a.m? What could not wait until normal business hours? What was so sensitive about these particular pardons that they could not go through the standard review process that applies to every other clemency decision? The only plausible answer, the one that every reasonable observer will reach, is that these pardons could not survive normal scrutiny. They would have been rejected by the career professionals at Justice. They would have raised red flags that would have stopped the process in its tracks. So Trump, according to these documents, simply bypassed the entire system and acted alone in the dark. The connection between these secret pardons and the broader Epstein cover-up that has characterized this administration cannot be overstated. For months, there has been a sustained, deliberate effort to keep information about Epstein's network away from the American public. The calls for the release of the full Epstein files have grown louder and more urgent with each passing week. Victims have come forward demanding accountability. Journalists have filed Freedom of Information requests that have been ignored or delayed. Congressional committees have issued subpoenas that have been met with stonewalling and legalistic evasions. At the center of all of this has been a pattern of obstruction that critics have found increasingly difficult to explain through normal bureaucratic inertia. FBI Director Kash Patel has made public statements suggesting that court orders prevent the release of Epstein-related documents, claims that judges themselves have stepped forward to contradict. Attorney General Pam Bondi has sat through congressional hearings and deflected question after question about why the Justice Department cannot seem to produce documents that should be readily available. The impression that has formed in the public mind is of an administration that has something to hide, something so damaging that it justifies a sustained campaign of obstruction. And now, into that already suspicious landscape, comes this leak about 3 a.m. pardons for Epstein associates. If you were trying to construct a pattern of evidence suggesting that the Trump administration is actively protecting the Epstein network, you could not design a more damning pair of facts. On one hand, prevent the public from learning the truth about who was involved in Epstein's operations. On the other hand, use the president's constitutional pardon power to shield specific individuals from legal consequences for their involvement. The two strategies work in perfect harmony. The stonewalling keeps the information hidden. The pardons make sure that even if the information eventually comes out, the people involved cannot be prosecuted. It is a comprehensive protection racket, and the only remaining mystery is who exactly is being protected and why. Let me share with you some of the specific details that have emerged from the leaked documents because they are genuinely chilling. According to the materials that have been obtained by multiple news organizations, Trump reportedly signed these pardons in mid-November at approximately 3 a.m. The recipients include individuals with documented ties to Epstein's inner circle, people who attended his parties, traveled on his private planes, visited his various properties. These are not random names pulled from a hat. These are people who moved in the same rarefied circles as Epstein, who had access to his world, who were part of the ecosystem that enabled his crimes to continue for so many years without meaningful interference from law enforcement. The specific criminal charges that were forgiven by these pardons have not yet been fully disclosed, but early reporting suggests they include serious federal offenses that would typically attract significant prison time. The question of why Trump would take such an enormous political risk is the question that everyone in Washington is asking right now. The conventional wisdom before this scandal broke was that Trump was virtually immune to political damage. He had survived 2 impeachments, a criminal conviction, multiple felony indictments, and countless controversies that would have ended any other political career. His base was seen as unshakable, willing to forgive or ignore almost anything. But the Epstein connection is different. The Epstein connection cuts through the usual partisan defenses. You cannot dismiss concerns about child sex trafficking as a witch hunt. You cannot wave away the exploitation of young women as fake news. These are crimes that disgust normal people regardless of their political affiliation. They are crimes that transcend the red-blue divide and speak to something more fundamental about human decency. And when a president is accused of secretly protecting people involved in those crimes, the political calculus changes dramatically. The timing of this leak could hardly be worse for Trump. Right as renewed demands for the release of the Epstein files were reaching a fever pitch, right as congressional pressure was building to force the administration to finally come clean about what it knows, right as the 2026 midterm elections were beginning to come into focus, this story breaks. The political damage is not theoretical, it is already happening. Republican strategists speaking privately to reporters have expressed alarm about what this scandal could do to the party's chances in the upcoming elections. Democratic campaign committees are already preparing ads that tie vulnerable Republican incumbents to Trump's 3AM pardons. The independent voters who often decide elections, the ones who do not pay close attention to politics but who have a visceral negative reaction to anything involving Epstein, are starting to tune in. And what they are seeing is a president acting in the middle of the night to protect people connected to a child sex trafficker. That image is going to stick. The White House response to this growing firestorm has been telling in what it does not say. Officials have suggested that the leaked documents might be fabricated, though they have provided no evidence to support that suggestion. They have refused to answer direct questions about whether any pardons were signed at 3 a.m. They have not released the names of any pardon recipients. They have not explained why the normal Justice Department review process was allegedly bypassed. They have not addressed the connection between the pardons and Epstein. In short, they are doing everything except providing the straightforward answers that the situation demands. And that silence is being interpreted by observers across the political spectrum as a tacit admission that the underlying allegations are essentially true. If the pardons were defensible, the White House would be defending them. If there were innocent explanations, we would be hearing them. Instead, we hear nothing but procedural objections and vague suggestions of inauthenticity. That is not the behavior of an administration with nothing to hide. Let me paint you a picture of where this scandal goes from here, because the trajectory is already becoming clear and it is absolutely devastating for the Trump presidency. Congressional hearings are now all but inevitable. The bipartisan outrage that has erupted in response to these leaked documents has reached a volume that Republican leadership simply cannot ignore. When members of your own party are standing on the House floor demanding investigations into your conduct, when your usual defenders are suddenly going silent or, worse, expressing their own concerns, the political math changes fundamentally. The hearings that are coming will not be the usual partisan theater where Democrats accuse and Republicans deflect. These hearings will be different because the questions at their core are not partisan questions. They are questions about basic decency, about the rule of law, about whether the President of the United States used his constitutional powers to shield people connected to a child sex trafficker from accountability. What will those hearings look like? Let me walk you through the likely shape of the coming storm. First, the committees will subpoena every document related to the November pardons. They will demand the names of every recipient, the specific crimes for which they were pardoned, the justifications recorded in White House files, and the communications between Trump and anyone involved in the decision. Second, they will call White House officials to testify under oath. This includes the Chief of Staff, the White House Counsel, the Staff Secretary who logged the pardon documents, and anyone else who was present at 3 in the morning when these signatures allegedly occurred. Third, they will investigate the Justice Department's role or lack thereof. Why was the office of the pardon attorney bypassed? Who made that decision? Were any career officials pressured or threatened to keep quiet about what they knew? Fourth, they will explore the Epstein connections in depth. Who are these pardon recipients? What exactly was their relationship to Jeffrey Epstein? What information do they have about Epstein's operations and the powerful people who participated in them? The legal implications of the scandal are potentially even more serious than the political ones. The conventional wisdom says that presidential pardons are absolute, that the Constitution gives the president unfettered authority to grant clemency for federal crimes, and that is broadly true. The Supreme Court has long held that the pardon power is broad and largely beyond judicial review. But even that broad power has limits. And one of the most important limits is that a pardon cannot be used as part of a criminal conspiracy or to obstruct justice. If the evidence shows that Trump granted these pardons to prevent witnesses from cooperating with ongoing investigations into Epstein's network, that could itself constitute criminal conduct. Obstruction of justice is a federal crime. And while a sitting president might be immune from prosecution under current Justice Department guidelines, that immunity would not necessarily extend to his associates or survive his departure from office. Think about the implications of that for a moment. The same pardon power that Trump allegedly used to protect Epstein associates could end up being the legal theory that leads to his own criminal exposure. If prosecutors can show that the pardons were part of a broader scheme to obstruct investigations, to hide evidence, to protect powerful people from accountability, that is not a legitimate use of constitutional authority. That is an abuse of power that strikes at the heart of the criminal justice system, and the 3 a.m. timing, the bypassing of normal procedures, the connection to Epstein, all of these facts feed directly into that legal theory. You do not act in secret at 3 in the morning if you are doing something legitimate. You do not bypass every safeguard if you are confident in your decision. You do not refuse to explain your actions if you have nothing to hide. The electoral implications of this scandal are equally profound. We are now approximately 6 months away from the midterm elections, and this story could not have broken at a worse time for Republicans who are fighting to hold on to their narrow majorities. Every vulnerable Republican incumbent is now going to be asked about Trump's 3 a.m. pardons. Every debate, every town hall, every campaign appearance will include questions about whether they support secret clemency for Epstein associates. The Democratic campaign committees have already begun preparing advertising campaigns that will tie Republican candidates directly to this scandal, forcing them to either defend the indefensible or distance themselves from a president who remains deeply popular with the party's base. It is a political trap with no good escape route. Defend Trump, and you are defending 3 a.m. pardons for Epstein associates. Distance yourself from Trump, and you risk alienating the core supporters you need to turn out on Election Day. The independent voters who often decide the outcome of close elections are the ones who may matter most here. These are the people who do not follow politics obsessively, who do not have strong partisan loyalties, who make up their minds based on the major stories that break through the noise. The Epstein scandal breaks through the noise. It is not a complicated policy dispute or a nuanced legal argument. It is a story about a president and a sex trafficker and secret pardons signed in the middle of the night. That story is easy to understand, easy to remember, and easy to feel outrage about. Independent voters who might have been willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt on other issues are going to have a much harder time doing so on this one. The visceral disgust that normal people feel when they hear the name Jeffrey Epstein is going to attach itself to Trump in ways that no amount of campaign spending can wash away. Let me also address the question of Trump's base, because it is more complicated than many commentators realize. The conventional wisdom says that Trump's supporters will stick with him no matter what, that their loyalty is absolute and unconditional. That has been largely true through 2 impeachments, through the January 6th investigation, through the criminal convictions, through everything. But the Epstein connection is different. The Epstein connection touches on something that even the most loyal Trump supporters care about: the protection of children. Many of Trump's strongest supporters are social conservatives who prioritize family values, who believe in law and order, who have deep moral convictions about the exploitation of the vulnerable. For those voters, learning that their president secretly pardoned Epstein associates at 3 in the morning is not just another political controversy, it is a moral crisis. It forces them to reconcile their support for Trump with their fundamental beliefs about right and wrong. Some of them will find a way to do that, some of them will not, and in a close election, even a small erosion of the base can be decisive. The international dimension of this scandal should not be overlooked either. America's allies around the world are watching this story unfold with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The United States has long positioned itself as a leader in the fight against human trafficking and the protection of vulnerable populations. American presidents have lectured other nations about the importance of accountability for those who exploit children. Now, those same allies are watching as an American president is accused of secretly pardoning people connected to one of the most notorious traffickers in modern history. The damage to American credibility and moral authority is incalculable. When the United States speaks out about human rights abuses in other countries, the response will inevitably be, "What about your president's 3 a.m. pardons for Epstein associates?" That question will not go away. It will echo through diplomatic conversations for years to come. So, where do we stand right now, at this exact moment in the unfolding of this story? We have leaked documents that have not yet been fully authenticated, but that multiple news organizations have reviewed and found credible. We have a White House that has not actually denied the underlying allegations. We have bipartisan outrage and calls for immediate congressional investigations. We have a president who is reportedly scrambling to contain the damage, meeting with advisors, crafting responses, trying to figure out how to survive a scandal that strikes at the very core of his political identity. And we have a public that is just beginning to understand the full scope of what these leaked documents allegedly reveal. The next few weeks will be critical. The congressional hearings will happen. The testimony will be given under oath. The documents will be reviewed and analyzed. And slowly, painfully, the truth will emerge about what happened at 3 in the morning on that November night. What you need to remember as this story continues to develop is that the scandal is not just about the pardons themselves. It is about the secrecy. It is about the timing. It is about the bypassing of normal procedures. It is about the connection to Epstein. It is about the broader pattern of obstruction that has characterized this administration's handling of everything related to the Epstein network. Each of those elements alone might be explainable. Together, they form a picture that is almost impossible to defend. The American people deserve to know who received those pardons and why. They deserve to know what Trump knew about these individuals and when he knew it. They deserve to know whether the pardon power was used to obstruct justice and protect powerful people from accountability. And they deserve to know whether the President of the United States has any further connections to the Epstein network that have not yet been disclosed. Those questions are not going away. They will be asked, and eventually, they will be answered. The only remaining mystery is how much damage the answers will do before this nightmare reaches its final conclusion.